Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes running fast if you're the Car Chick. Now, here she is.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Straight Shift. We are on the last day of the decade. Tomorrow is going to be 2020. Can you believe the year has gone by so fast? So what I wanted to do for the last episode of the year is go over 7 things that your car really wishes you knew because it may be costing you money and possibly pissing off your car. My car, Maggie, she gets pissed off about things and lets me know about it. So let's just jump straight into it. Number 1 thing that could be costing you money is too many keys on your keychain. Are you one of those people that has a keychain that has like 100 keys on it and you don't even know what half of them are for, but you're kind of afraid to take them off because you don't know what they're for and you might need them someday? Well, that heavy keychain could actually be damaging your car. If you have a car where you still actually have to stick the key into the ignition, pretty much all my cars are still that way. I don't have any cars that have the new keyless ignition like the new ones do. All my cars are older. But if your keychain has a whole bunch of keys on it, it's heavy. You may think, okay, it's, kind of heavy. It's not so bad. But it doesn't take that much weight to damage the ignition switch. You stick your key in there into the ignition and the weight of it pulling it down, I have seen it break ignition switches in cars or wear it out faster over time. And those ignition switches are pretty expensive to replace. It can be, $500 to $1,000. And it's a really easy solution. Just take some of those dang keys off your keychain. Now, if you have keys, like my husband has a lot of keys on his keychain, he's got the car key. We keep all of our car keys separate, but on his keychain, he's got his car key, he's got the house key, his parents' house key, and then he's got keys to all the doors at the building where he works, as well as all the keys to his various tool carts. So that kind of adds up. So what he's done is he puts all of the building and tool chest keys on one keychain, and he keeps the car keys separate, but they quick connect together. So he can put them all together when he goes to, put them wherever it is he stores his keys or when he hangs them up on the hooks at home. But when he gets in the car to drive, he disconnects them and only sticks the car key into the ignition, thus preserving the ignition switch. Now, even if you have a car that has the keyless ignition where the key just has to be somewhere in the car for the radio signal to reach the car and it knows, the key's in here so I can drive, those key fobs are very expensive, but they're also pretty delicate. The plastic casing on them is not the most durable. So if you have ever dropped your keys, I probably drop my keys, at least once a week onto the pavement just because I'm naturally graceful. But if you have a lot of keys on your keychain, and again, it's heavy, if you drop that on the ground, it's really easy to break that really expensive key fob. I dropped mine a while ago. Even though Maggie has to put the key in the ignition, she still has the key fob to unlock, most of the doors now. Some of them aren't working anymore. But that plastic case broke. And for German cars, those things are like $400 or $500 each to replace. So fortunately, we were able to find just a replacement plastic case on eBay and painstakingly disassemble the key fob and move all the electronics over and into the new case to save money. But if you have heavy keys on it, and you drop your keys, it just increases the likelihood that you could break that very expensive key fob. So really simple solution. Keep your car keys separate from the rest of your keys and just put them on a quick connect keychain so that you can store them together. But then when you go to drive the car, you can take them apart or just keep them separate. It's just a little thing that could save you money in the long run. Number 2, lazy battery installs. This is the time of year when most people end up needing a new battery because it is winter, and at least places that get fairly cold to very cold, that's the time when your battery is most likely to die. right before Thanksgiving, this happened to my mom. She was out grocery shopping and whatnot, and she came back out to her car in the parking lot after getting some groceries. And lo and behold, it wouldn't start. Two of the cells inside the battery had just gone kaput. And when the cells inside a battery decide to die, they just die. They don't give you any warning. They're just gone. And next thing you know, your car doesn't start. So she called AAA and they came and rescued her. And of course, they tested her battery. And yep, sure enough, 2 dead cells. So they replaced her battery for her. But the technician did not tighten the hold down bracket that holds your battery in place. The top 2 things that shorten a battery life are vibrations and heat cycling. Heat cycling is just a normal part of car life because many batteries are underneath the hood and the engine compartment just heats up and cools down when you drive the car due to the heat coming from the engine. Add to that, in the winter, the outside temperatures are colder, especially up north. Then the temperature variances are greater. So your battery is going from really cold to really hot to really cold to really hot. And each of those heat cycles deteriorates the battery life. This is why batteries in cars up north don't last nearly as long as they do down here in the south, because they just have more extreme heat cycling. But vibration is another thing that can shorten your battery life. And I just so often, especially if you have, a roadside assistance place, change the battery for you, or you go to the parts store and they do that free install for your battery. Those people may or may not be automotive technicians. And even if they are, sometimes they're just not as diligent about doing the job. They're just trying to do it as quickly as possible. And most cases that I personally have seen, they have not tighten down that hold down bracket that holds the battery. And so that causes your battery to just move around a little bit when you're driving. And those vibrations will shorten the battery life. So of course, when we went out to the garage and looked at my mom's car specifically to check for this after she got her new battery, oh yeah, they didn't tighten it down. The battery was flopping around, and that can also cause some other dangerous situations. So we tightened that down so it was nice and secure. But it happens more often than you think. So if you have to replace your battery this winter, make sure that whoever replaces it has tightened down that hold down bracket so the battery is nice and secure and it is not going to vibrate or move around at all. And make them show you that, because they'll be like, oh yeah, it's fine, I tightened it down. Yeah, right. I would like to see that, or just check it yourself if you know how to do that. Now, batteries, another thing that I've seen happen is they don't necessarily replace what is called a vent hose. For those of us in my car, Maggie, her battery is not in the engine compartment. It's in the trunk, and that's a very common thing for the European manufacturers to do. And these days, a lot of SUVs, especially the American brands, the battery will be somewhere in the cabin, like underneath the back seat or underneath the driver's seat. They're hiding these things in all sorts of places to try and distribute the weight. And plus, everything under the engine compartment's gotten more complicated, so you kind of never know where your battery's actually going to be located. There's always still terminals under the engine compartment if you need to do a jump, but the physical battery itself may be hidden somewhere else in your car. Maggie's is underneath the deck in what we call the boot, the back of the hatchback, where a spare tire would be in a normal car. Of course, Minis don't have those. But when, batteries are lead acid batteries. So when they're stored inside the car somewhere or inside the trunk, they've got to have these vent tubes so that no noxious fumes permeate the cabin and kill you, or at least make you sick, or corrode the interior materials of your car, the fabrics, any of the components of the car that are around that battery tray. If there is any leaking or any fumes coming out of the battery at all, that can cause damage. So batteries that are inside the car somewhere, not under the hood, have a vent hose somewhere to vent those fumes. Again, technicians who replace the battery, especially ones who are at the part stores, or just they don't do this every day. They're not as familiar with how the cars work that have the batteries inside. they will frequently forget or not know to reconnect that vent tube. So if you replace your battery and you have a car where the battery is somewhere inside the car or in the trunk, make sure, have them verify and show you that they have reconnected that vent tube. Another thing that you can do, this is just a little tip that I believe in, Odyssey batteries. That's what I have in my car. I'm a huge fan of Odyssey batteries. They have a totally different construction than a normal battery, so they're not going to be as sensitive to the deep heat cycling and the vibrations of a normal lead acid battery. They have a completely different construction. I'm not going to go into the details of that because I actually want to get somebody from Odyssey on the podcast next year who can go into those really geeky, nitty-gritty technical details for people who care. But suffice it to say that, Odyssey batteries tend to last 2 to 3 times longer than a normal battery. Now, granted, they cost a lot more. So not everybody wants to make that investment, but if you do a lot of things like tailgating and you're running the car radio or you're powering some fun things for the tailgate by the car, when the engine's not running, that obviously leaving your radio on can drain the battery really quickly. Or if you do live up north where it gets really, really cold and your battery's doing a deep heat cycle every day, the Odyssey batteries are not as sensitive to that. And so they will last longer. I expect the battery in Maggie to last about 10 years, whereas 2 to 3 years is kind of the norm for batteries. We can sometimes get 4 years out of them down here in the South, but that's just a little tip. Odyssey is not paying me to promote their batteries in any way, shape, or form, although they did give me mine for free, which I appreciated because they help sponsor our television show, Rust Rescue. But I'm just a huge fan of them, so you might want to check that out if you don't like having to replace your battery, if you find your battery dies pretty easily. Or if you're just one of those people like my mother who doesn't always get everything shut off properly, leaves lights on in her car, and her battery dies often. So I think next I'm going to get her an Odyssey battery. All right, number 3, the number 3 thing that can be costing you money, driving on fumes. If you're on Facebook or social media, you have probably seen that meme about what kind of driver are you, and the picture shows a gas gauge where the fuel level is halfway and the caption says, "Oh my God, I've got to fill up now," versus the gas gauge being on E and the caption says, "I got this." People tend to fall into one of those two categories. It's like they fill up constantly. They never want their gas tank to get low, remotely low, versus those of us, and I will firmly put myself into this category, who, it's almost like a badge of honor to see how far below E you can go and still make it to the gas station. I have found, because I have a digital display that tells me how many miles I have left on this tank, and it gets down to 0. And interestingly enough, there's something below 0. It will go to 0, and then it will go to 00, and then it will actually go to dash. So I've only seen that once, but I have recently learned, and this is something that I didn't even really think about now that I think about it, it makes total sense. But running your car down that low on gas, and you don't even have to be running on fumes, even just below a quarter of a tank consistently can damage your fuel pump and cause you to have to replace it early. And those things, again, are expensive. So, here's how that works. The fuel pump, the gas in your car acts as both a lubricant and a coolant for the internal structure of your fuel pump. When the gas flows in, it's lubricating the internal parts, it's cooling the internal parts of that fuel pump, but also when your fuel pump is just sitting there in your gas tank, the fuel pump sits vertically. The fuel pump itself is, gas tanks on average are probably 10 inches tall. Obviously on the big trucks and SUVs, they're bigger than that, but give or take, you can, 10 inches is about the height of your average gas tank. The fuel pump itself is around 4 inches tall, and it's mounted vertically inside that gas tank. So, when you start getting down, below a half a tank, now all of a sudden, the fuel pump is no longer covered on the outside. It's not sitting in a nice, cool bath of gas. And then the lower and lower and lower that gas level gets, and more of the fuel pump that is not sitting in that gas bath, it's not getting the benefit of that exterior cooling that the gas provides. And you think, oh, that's not a big deal, but it actually can be. So, especially when, you're dealing with extreme hot temperatures. So those of you who are like me and have a tendency to, run on fumes a lot, you're actually damaging your fuel pump. And so one of my New Year's resolutions this year is to quit doing that. And when I get to a quarter of a tank, I'm going to go ahead and fill up. I'm not going to let it get down, to that zero mark. It used to be just kind of a challenge for me. It's like, ooh, I wonder how far I can go. Can I coast? Can I draft behind somebody else? I've literally drafted behind a garbage truck on the freeway to be able to make it to an exit ramp where there was a gas station. So I'm realizing that's no longer a good competitive sport. It's not a badge of honor. It's actually something that could be damaging my very expensive fuel pump. So I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to fuel up when I get to about a quarter of a tank of gas. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why it's bad to just put your car into park and why it's bad to only replace one tire. Straight Shift will be right back. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of or about finding the right car at a great price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 704-248-8706. That's 704-248-8706. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
The Car Chick is back for more Straight Shift.
Welcome back to the Straight Shift. We are talking about 7 things your car wishes you knew because it's probably costing you money. Number 4, just putting your car into park. Now, this is for those of you that drive automatics, those of us that drive 3-pedal cars with what I call proper transmissions. This is not an issue, but most cars these days are automatics. And when you go to park your car, you pull into the garage, you pull into the parking space, you tend to just throw it into park, turn off the car, get out, go on your way. This can increase the wear and tear on your motor mounts. Engine mounts are kind of like joints in your body. They're designed to absorb shock and movement of the overall vehicle. Most cars have typically 3 to 4 engine mounts with the location depending on the type of vehicle that you have. But the engine mounts themselves are these little rubber donuts, and they do 2 things. They hold the engine in the car, and they keep the engine from actually rotating inside your engine bay when you start the car up because, the engine is spinning and rotating. If it didn't have something holding it down, it would actually spin and rotate out the back of your car. So the engine mounts do those 2 things. And for the most part, obviously, depending on manufacturer, in a front-wheel drive car, you have 2 different types of mounts. You have the hanging mounts, and those are the ones that hold the engine in place. And then you have torque mounts, and those actually keep the engine from rotating when it starts up. In a rear-wheel drive car, you typically just have 1 mount that has to do both jobs. And all-wheel drive cars, it's a free-for-all. Totally depends on the manufacturer. But again, these mounts are designed, they absorb movement, they handle the jostling, they handle the shifting of the weight of the car on the engine while you're driving. This is why in racing, that weight shifting of the car is so extreme and all that movement is extreme with racing, we wear out motor mounts really fast. But average driving, it's amazing how much your car weight does shift around. So those engine mounts are critically important. And if you just put your car into park when you stop, the full weight of your car ends up resting on those mounts, especially if you're on a hill or any sort of slight incline. But no street or surface is 100% perfectly level. So, one engine mount or maybe two engine mounts, the car is going to be the weight is going to be leaning and putting a little more of its weight on one or two mounts. It's not going to be resting evenly across all of them. And so that kind of leaning on that one or two mounts is going to cause that mount to wear out faster. Because like I said, it's just a little rubber donut. And we're really expecting a lot out of little rubber donuts. European cars, again, I drive a Mini Cooper, which may not have a BMW badge on it, but it has a BMW price tag to maintain. I've got hydraulic engine mounts that have fluid inside them, and, they're supposed to be, much better at doing what they do. But honestly, they're just more expensive to replace, and they break just as easily as the little rubber ones. But what you really want to do to prevent this, and this is just a habit that you have to decide you want to get into, is when you bring your car to a stop, instead of just throwing it in park, you put the car into neutral. Then you apply the parking brake. Hey, that's what it's for. It's called a parking brake. It's designed for parking, and it's not just to hold the car when you're parking on extreme hills. You really should do it all the time, because when you apply that parking brake, now you've got the parking brake doing its job, and it's holding the weight of the car. So now your engine mounts are only supporting the weight of the engine, which is their job. It's what they're designed to do, and that will reduce the wear and tear on them. This is just as important, and sometimes more important, in smaller cars, because the smaller the car, for example, I'm going to use my mom's Corolla again, those mounts are really tiny. Those are really small. They're like mini rubber donuts. They're not even full-size donuts. You get into the big trucks and they look a little more like bagels. But the smaller those little rubber mounts, the more you're asking, this little weak mount to do. So even if you have a small car, it's just as important to put it in neutral, apply the parking brake, then you can put it in park, and now you can get off. It's, a couple little extra steps, but motor mounts, again, are expensive to replace. So if you plan to keep your car for a long time and you're trying to minimize the cost of maintaining that car and the cost of keeping it going for, 100, 200, even 300,000 miles, these are the little things that do make a difference and add up over time. Now, some cars these days have these new electronic parking brakes, and a lot of those engage automatically when you put the car into park. So the car is now smart enough to say, oh, we're going into park. Okay, I'm going to go into neutral first, put the parking brake on, and then go into park. And it doesn't even tell you it's doing that. So if you don't know if you have a car that does that, RTFM. Read the frickin' manual to learn how your car works and make sure also that the parking and brake is properly engaged. It makes me nervous, all the new transmissions with the electric parking brake, and you're not actually taking any sort of handle and moving it into park. You're just pushing a button and relying on the car to know what it's supposed to do when you push that button. There have been some problems with those. That's how the young actor who played Chekhov in the new Star Trek movies was killed by his own Jeep Grand Cherokee, because he put it in park. He thought he put it in park. He thought it was in park. It was not in park. It hadn't fully engaged, and he didn't know it, and it rolled back down his driveway while he was checking his mail, and it squished him between his big stone mailbox and killed him. So they're working on resolving all those problems at Chrysler. There's recalls on it, but if you have one of those vehicles that has the electric parking brake and even the fully kind of electric transmission, just be sure you understand how it works and be very careful to make sure that it really is in park. But this can help save your engine mounts and, again, save you some moolah in the long run. Number 5, turning your car off without first shutting off all the accessories. And this is something that used to be preached a lot more. I remember my dad always taught me, okay, before you turn the car off, turn off the radio, turn off the air conditioner, turn off the fan, pretty much turn off everything in the car that you could. Of course, back then there weren't as many things to turn off, but it's especially important to turn off the fan for the HVAC system, because when you start the car up, it makes the battery work a heck of a lot harder. Typically when, you turn the car off, you these are for cars that you actually, turn the key in them. These are becoming more and more rare, but there's still millions and millions of them out there. So, remember when you turn the key, there's a couple different positions. There's that sort of on, and then there's the accessories that says, okay, I can run my radio, I can run the fan, I can run the AC, but the engine's not started yet. And that's typically the one that we'll turn on if we're parked and we just want to sit and listen to the radio, and we still want the AC to be on, but we don't want the engine running. Well, when you turn it into that position, it pulls power from the battery before the starter does. So even if you're not just sitting there in that position listening to the radio with the car off, the whole mechanism of turning the key, it has to go through those steps. And when it hits that accessory position before actually starting the car, all the power is pulling from the battery before the starter does. Then when you go to start the car actually has to turn off all those accessories again so that it can reroute that battery power to the starter. The starter takes the most power from your battery. Hence why if your battery's weak and you go to start your car, the lights might come on, it might bing at you, but then it won't turn over because there's not enough power to power the starter. And so just anytime you're having to turn the accessories on and off and you're routing power from the battery, it's making everything work harder. It's not just making the battery work harder. It is also making, all those accessories work harder. Like, for example, the blower motor for your heat and air conditioning. That motor turns on and off and on and off. That's going to wear it out a little bit faster than if it just had to turn on once. It also makes your alternator work harder. Your car uses more gas. It's, in terms of using more gas, it's probably not enough for you as a private individual to notice. It'll probably cost you a few extra bucks a year on gas. But looking on the aggregate across millions and millions and millions of cars across the entire planet using more and more gas, it actually does add up to a significant amount of fuel. And that's why a lot of your newer cars, they are smarter and they don't they turn all the accessories off first before you start the car. Again, when you have this, push button start and keyless ignition, all the newer, fancier technology, the car's computer is making all these decisions for you. And a lot of them are smart enough to know, hey, okay, I'm going to make sure all the accessories are off before I try to pull power for the starter, because the engineers who built the car know these things, and they were smart when they built it. Now, not all the car manufacturers were smart enough, and a lot of the newer cars, they prevent you from turning off all of the accessories because they want all these things to be on for you because it's comfortable and it's convenient, and they want to show you that the car that they built is ready for you to just get in and not think about and drive. It's it's like magic. A lot of GM cars are like this. And, it's, from a luxury standpoint, that's really very thoughtful. But the result is GM cars tend to blow through batteries faster than a lot of other manufacturers. So, overall, we are trading comfort and convenience for money in the form of having to replace parts sooner. So again, if you're really trying to extend the life of your car and minimize the amount of money that it takes to do that, turn off your radio, your HVAC system, that fan, everything that you can turn it off before you turn the car off. And that's just going to save you a little bit of wear and tear. Number 6, only replacing one tire. And we've all had this happen, right? Especially, here in Charlotte, everything, the city's constantly under construction. We're growing so much. And as a result, we have nails and other crap littering our streets. And literally one of my clients, she just took delivery of her swanky, beautiful new Genesis G80. It's a beautiful car. And literally like the first few days she had it, she already got a flat tire because she lives in a fairly new neighborhood and there was a nail in it and she got a nail in her brand new tire. So very frustrating. But where it gets to costing you money is people that have all-wheel drive vehicles. Subarus or any other vehicle that is truly all-wheel drive. And this is something that I preach to my clients that buy all-wheel drive vehicles. If you have to replace one tire because you ran over a nail or whatnot, you either have to buy that one tire and have it shaved down Actually shave the tread off of your brand new tire so that it matches the same tread depth of your other 3 tires, or you need to buy 4 new tires. Kind of take your pick. But, unless this happens, within a few months and a few thousand miles of you buying new tires, you need to make sure that all 4 always have the same tread depth, and they have to match. That tread pattern has to match. So it needs to be the same make and model tire. And a lot of times, people, especially if they're traveling and this happens and they're going to, whatever shop they can and they're trying to do it fast, that shop doesn't have the tire that's on their car in stock. It's going to take them, a day or so to get it. So they'll just buy whatever, one tire of some off brand that's as cheap as possible, buy that, put it on the car and go home. Now that's fine if you're then going to go home and then go to your mechanic and have them order the right tire and then just, junk the one that you bought temporarily. But, again, that's throwing away a lot of money. But the problem is, here's why you have to make sure that the tread depth and pattern always matches on an all-wheel drive vehicle. All-wheel drive systems are smart. They're called intelligent all-wheel drive. What makes them smart is that they know how to apply power to each wheel based on the rotating speed of that wheel. So if one tire is a different size because it has a little more tread, or worse, it's a totally different type of tire, or it has a different construction. So maybe this tire is softer and squishier and has more give to the sidewall than the other 3 tires, it is going to behave differently. In an all-wheel drive system, all 4 tires are a team. And it's very critical that they work together as a team. Driving for them is a team sport. And you have, connecting them are differentials. And the differentials, they kind of act as the team leaders to make sure that all 4 wheels are working together and doing what they're supposed to do. So if you have one tire that is not playing nicely, it's not following the same rules, it's not behaving the same way as the other 3, it makes the differential work harder to try and adjust for it. In different all-wheel drive systems, how complex that system is, and how expensive the implementation really depends. So, for example, Subaru's, their all-wheel drive system is pretty simple, but it's very well built. So if you have a little bit of variance in your tires, it's not going to cause as much wear and tear on the diff and the rest of your suspension. Audi, for example, they have a really freaking complicated system. It's called an active diff, and it's doing a million different things, making sure that all the tires are, working not just as a team, but with military precision. And it's very, very expensive. Mitsubishi, for example, their system is probably more complicated than it needs to be, but it's also really cheaply built. So putting a mismatched tire on an all-wheel drive Mitsubishi can actually all-out break your differential. I have seen it happen. So again, if you have an all-wheel drive vehicle, all 4 tires must match in the make and model so that the construction is the same and the tread patterns are the same, and in tread depth. So if you have to replace one tire, congratulations. You need to replace all 4 tires if you don't want to tear up your differential, which is way more expensive to replace than tires. So that is just one of the increased maintenance costs of having an all-wheel drive vehicle, but it is critically important. And finally, number 7, smoking in your car. Gonna get up on my anti-smoking soapbox for just a minute, because not only is it bad for you, it's bad for everybody else that's in your car, but it's also bad for your car's resale value. Smoker cars typically sell anywhere from $1,000 to several $1,000s less than non-smoker cars. Why? Because only other smokers can stand to be anywhere near that smell. And, if you do smoke, you're you're not as sensitive to that smell. Kind of like those of us who have cats, we're not as sensitive to that cat smell. And so we don't realize that our houses stink a little bit until other people come in who don't have cats. They're like, ooh, what's that smell? So no matter how much you clean it, it's the same thing with your car. If you're a smoker, you don't realize just how bad it smells. And I am very, very sensitive to it because I'm severely allergic to cigarette smoke. So if I walk by a car that anyone's ever smoked in, I can tell. But the smell also, it seeps into all the materials in your car. It seeps into the fabrics, whether it's cloth or leather. It seeps into the headliner. It seeps into the door panels. It can even seep into the plastics, the wood trim. Any of those interior materials have a certain amount of, porousness to them. And there's nothing that truly can get rid of that smell. A lot of dealers, if the smell isn't what they consider too horrendous, they'll do what's called a chemical bomb, when they're detailing it to try and get rid of that smell. And it will cover it up for at least long enough for them typically to sell the car. But then, you get that chemical smell and you're like, what is this weird chemical smell? And why do they have to use so many chemicals to clean this car? If you're buying a used car, that is one red flag that it might have been a smoker car. But all it takes is, a few weeks or the next really hot day. When it gets hot, everything expands. And so all those porous materials in your car will expand slightly and open up. And all those smells that have been soaking into it will be released. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this was a smoker car. So this is why smoker cars have a lower resale value. They also tend to have stains on the headliner, the seats, the steering wheel, where people's, hands with all the nicotine on them, or even the cigarette itself, were sitting on the steering wheel. They frequently have burns because somebody has dropped their cigarette, and if you do that while you're driving, that can also be extremely dangerous because it can scare the crap out of you and cause you to lose control of the car as it's burning your legs. So please, your car hates it when you smoke in it. So please don't. If you're a smoker, hey, 2020, great time to stop, New Year's resolution. But, if you're not going to stop smoking, at least stop smoking in your car because you are absolutely killing its resale value. So folks, I hope these 7 things are helpful to you, especially if you want your car to last a long time with the minimal amount of money invested to do so. Have a safe and happy New Year. If you are going out on the town tonight, please drive safely. Do not drink and drive at all. That's why they have these wonderful things called taxis and Ubers and Lyfts and places where you can crash. So be safe. Happy New Year, and we'll see you in the next decade.
The Straight Shift Podcast is copyright Leanne Shattuck, The Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of Leanne Shattuck or The Car Chick.